Thank you again, everybody, for being here today. So what I'm going to be talking about for the next few minutes is the next couple of releases of Möbius, what we're planning to do, and I want to talk a little bit about strategically what we want to do in a more broad sense with the products and as a company. A big part of the job that I do and that Johnny does is to meet with people like yourselves, listen to the really interesting things that you're doing from a teaching perspective, hopefully using Möbius and Maple TA, listening to the things you want to do that are maybe just outside of your grasp with the tools, and listening to the challenges that you're encountering. And honestly, the hardest part of that are the cases where, I completely wholeheartedly agree with what you want to do, and I can't quite offer the solution to that problem right away. And one of the things that's really exciting for me in this new journey that we're embarking on with DigitalEd is the opportunity to provide more focus towards addressing those sorts of things. So both focus of the people involved in building and maintaining the product, so not having distraction with the other products at MapleSoft, but also being able to put more resources and overall more focus into our products to hopefully be able to satisfy those requests more quickly and in a better way. Another really nice thing about DigitalEd for us is a unique opportunity to, or I guess an impetus to step back and think about what are the things that we've done well, what are the things that we can improve on as a company. And so as much as Jim talked about, a lot of the people that you're seeing with DigitalEd are same people that you've known with MapleSoft, and as he showed you, we're bringing on a bunch more people as well. As much as we're the same people, we have some freedom to step back and rethink how we're going about building the products, how we're going about interacting with our users, and really, hopefully, improving that. So the first thing I wanted to talk about was sort of our high-level product initiatives that we've identified as part of that process. So the first one really is a better focus on user experience. In general, I would say that Maple TA as a product has grown out of a really strong user base of expert users. And what that has meant is that we have people like yourselves who get really embedded into the product, understand how it works. And the problem we've run into is you guys are creating really good content and there's other people that want to use it. That's one of the problems. And the experience for those people that aren't expert users is that there's a learning curve, or there has been a learning curve. And so if I look at this list of people that we designed for, students, instructors, authors, instructional designers, the instructor as an independent person from an author is something that we have not probably focused on as clearly in the past, and something that we need to focus on more clearly in the future. So as an instructor coming in with some pre-built content, being able to very easily get up and running in a course, very easily understand what's happening in the Gradebook, without having to be an expert in the software, without having to learn anything. I think in the past, revisiting the features that we built has been something that we have not done as good a job at as we would like. So making sure that we're going back to the features after they come out in a release, iterating them, doing that quickly, responding to user feedback is something that we feel is a key element of what we need to do as a company going forward. Jim talked about user collaboration, research projects. Steve Freno just talked about it as well. That's going to be a big theme of what I'm going to be talking about. Both on the product design side, so Johnny will talk a little bit about our efforts in this direction, but also on the research front, and really Steve talked about everything I wanted to say there, but all that stuff. Obviously there are strategic sort of development projects for us. Analytics is a huge part, a huge underpinning of a lot of what we want to be doing. Adaptivity of our content, content management, so both things like the content repository, how we distribute content. These are areas of strategic importance for us that we need to continue to push forward. And then renewal. The issues of stability, performance, how quickly you can get bug fixes out, how quickly you can get new features out, are all very, very heavily intertwined problems. And it's fundamentally, it's impossible to release more quickly if you're not stable. It's impossible to be stable if you're not releasing quickly. And that sort of fundamental renewal of our platform, of our technologies, is a big part of what we're working on today. And Darren Willis will talk after lunch a little bit about our engineering philosophy around this and how we hope that can really lead to a better user experience for all of you. So more concretely, I want to talk a little bit about what's coming up in Möbius 2018, which will be released just in a couple of weeks, really. So the first is analytics. So with Möbius 2018, we're adding a new analytics data stream to the product. And what this means is that for the student, or for the instructor, or the person analyzing what the student's doing, we're capturing a time series of events of the student's path through the platform, from login to launched lesson to navigated to page 2 to how did I do on question 3 to tried a new variation, tried another variation, started a slideshow, watched for 2 minutes, paused. Individual data points all along that path with student identifier, timestamps, obviously, the context of where they are, what their responses are, so that both we can look at sort of pre-built sorts of dashboards and information that we can provide, but also that we can start to look at some of these research questions about how students are interacting with the content, so we can start to learn more about both what makes good content, what makes good students, how we can improve how we're teaching, building the content, and so forth. So I'll take 2 seconds, I'm just going to switch over to my browser and just give a quick preview of the dashboarding. So what we're doing out of the gate with the dashboards is presenting them through Google Data Studio. And this allows us to do a few things, one of which is to more rapidly iterate those, sort of independent to product updates, or more the core product updates. So for example, here we have some high-level data here on my first page of my dashboard, looking at answering questions about just sort of when are the students accessing the system, what are they doing when they're accessing the system. So this is really kind of an administrative overview. So here we're seeing active days of the week. We've got heat map about when students are most active in the system, which can be useful for scheduling. Information about how many assignments, lessons are started over time, what proportion of students' time is spent doing what. So here, for example, we're seeing roughly 50% of their time on this particular, in this particular school's instance, students are engaged in lessons versus assignments, what they're doing within those individual lessons or slideshows. And then we can sort of drill down from there. So we've got sort of that high level overview, then we've got sort of the lesson and assignment level, and then we go down into slideshows and questions. So for example, if I take a look at inline questions, so these are questions that are appearing within our lessons, I can see a quick overview of where students are spending the most time or the least time, where they've checked their work the most or the least, where they've been most correct or most incorrect. If I, for example, go back to, let's say, to our assignment dashboard, we can see things like what page of the assignment students are spending the most time on. So if I drill down here into a particular assignment, we've graphed where the students are spending their time as they pass through the assignment. So roughly 27% of their time in this particular assignment spent on page 1, and you can see that roughly stays uniform, and they're clearly not trying very hard on question 11 on average, which worries me, but it's not my data, so I won't worry too much about it. Ultimately, the last couple of user summits, one of the questions that we've asked, and actually Steve has spent a lot of time asking, is what sorts of questions you are interested in asking of the data. And so these dashboards really are our first stab at trying to address that. But ultimately, this is one of these areas where we want to be getting a lot of user feedback from you, and incrementally changing, updating, adding to the information that we're presenting on these. On the renewal side of things, in this 2018 release that's coming out shortly, we have a move to Google for our hosted environment, and Darren will talk in detail about what that means and what that provides to us. We also are fully switching over to a brand new version of MapleNet, and so this new version of MapleNet will both be the default computation engine within Möbius and the new engine for math apps as well. On the performance side of things, what we're seeing in our internal load testing for, say, single computations, single calls to Maple, roughly a 100% speed up in response time for those individual calls, and with in tests with 1,000 concurrent simulated users, so all hitting assignments at exactly the same time, we're seeing like a 10-fold decrease in the median response time. So in general, it's something that we're seeing really positive performance results on, and something that we think is going to make the overall experience a lot better for students and for yourselves. On the math app side of things, this means things like responsiveness in the math apps, both to browser sizes. So if a student's looking at a math app on their phone, it'll attempt to resize down into that form factor, but also immediate response to things like sliders. So if I drag the slider, plots update immediately without the student having to let go of the mouse briefly and let it update. And then a big focus for us has been making sure that we're ready for GDPR. So both on the platform side of things having a way to get explicit consent to privacy policy from the students, which is fairly straightforward but important. But also this notion of being able to easily deploy into the European region in a scalable way with Google is a big part of that. Let's skip over that since I went live. Then we were aiming to do a somewhat smaller update later on in the fall. And this one, we want to focus a little bit more on some student and instructor or author experience issues. One of the things we've been working on for the last little while is a new math parsing mode. For those of you that have delved deeply into this, you know that we've got the sort of mathematical formula parsing mode, and we have a Maple parsing mode. The Maple parsing mode is expecting Maple syntax, and in a lot of cases when a student's inputting just a mathematical expression, that Maple syntax isn't necessarily natural to them. So we're putting effort into trying to create a parsing mode that is a little bit more natural, but that supports the breadth of what you would get out of the Maple syntax mode. Adding in syntax checking into math input and general student navigation improvements based on feedback. So just making sure that the student experience as they travel through the system is as seamless as possible. And then on the authoring side of things, some improvements to the content repository workflows, just trying to smooth over some items there. For next year, for 2019, sort of a bigger set of features that we're working on for that. One of those is an overhaul of the Gradebook and integration of the analytics information that I just showed you directly into the Gradebook. So the idea here with the Gradebook refresh is really towards making it simpler for students and instructors to get in there, get the data that they need without having to learn the Gradebook. They should be able to just navigate there, get their information, and move on. On the content management side of things, as I mentioned, support for instructors that aren't power users is really important, making it very easy to get in, start using content. At the same time, though, we need better support for managing large bodies of content. The theme here being that we're seeing more cases of user groups and ourselves wanting to be able to distribute content and maintain it. So being able to maintain content between sections over time and between institutions. So tools in that direction. And then also trying to get to this question of response-specific feedback and more adaptivity in our base question types. So sort of at a sort of feature level, that's what we have planned for the next little bit. As Jim mentioned, for DigitalEd, we've set out to be a purpose-driven company. And so looking at things from a more strategic level, our goal really is to try to provide improved learning outcomes in STEM courses. And so really we want to use that as the driving principle between the features that we decide to build and how we go about that. And really why we think that we're well placed to have something to say in this area. Well, one is listening to the presentations that I heard this morning. It's clear that you feel the same way, that there's an opportunity with Möbius, Maple TA, with these technologies to provide better learning experiences for students in STEM. Fundamentally, the notion that students learn best by doing, and really it is a platform that's designed around interactivity and assessment throughout the learning process. As Jim said, Maple has a lot to offer that we probably haven't we haven't uncovered. Obviously, grading, visualization is a big part of what Maple offers, but it also gives us the opportunity to potentially understand what students are doing as they solve a problem, because we can parse what they're doing mathematically, as an example, or providing a tool for collaboration in a mathematical environment. There's a lot that Maple can provide to STEM learning. And as I mentioned, this new data stream I think is going to underpin a lot of what we want to do with the platform, and being able to ask questions of the content and about what students are doing with that data. And so really, from a strategic level, what we plan to be doing as a company mirrors a lot of what Steve just said, and ultimately we'll be working together on this, is really looking at that data stream that we're getting and working to establish metrics that are appropriate to the platform to demonstrate, to help drive improvement of learning outcomes in STEM. And ultimately, over time, taking that research level information and folding it back into the platform between dashboards and alerts and tools for machine learning, to be able to identify learning breakdowns, to refine content over time, and really to provide tools for improving learning outcomes. And ultimately for us, like I said, this is what we want to do as a company, but ultimately, really this is intended to be a collaboration where really we'd like to work together with all of you to identify research projects that we can engage in collectively, whether DigitalEd is simply there in a supporting way, or whether we're in there in a more active way to help identify these areas that Möbius can currently help to improve learning outcomes, and to help drive where the product goes with that same goal. And that's really what we're planning for the next little while. Any questions? Lunch starts right after this.
Short one. I've used Möbius in my course this year, and many students also wanted the printed version of the material.
Yeah.
I couldn't get it out of Möbius.
Yeah, that's a good question. So the comment was that his students used Möbius this past year, and one of the things they wanted to be able to do was to print the material. And I will absolutely concur that it's a little bit of a challenge to do so. I mean, fundamentally, there's some limitation to that. Going to fundamentally be a limitation, given that it is a platform about assessment and interactivity. But I think that's ultimately something that we do need to be doing, because some students still do like printing things off and taking notes, which is perfectly acceptable. So yeah, I do fundamentally agree that's something that we need to do, and I agree that it is not up to snuff right now.
Aaron, in 2019, referring to the objective of increasing the adaptability of the content.
Yeah.
So between laying the pipe work and starting to create data pools, and that point, you're therefore going to be starting to segment and profile student learning behavior.
So that's a good question. So the question was, between now when we've had this data stream coming online And 2019, when I talked about improving adaptability, if we're going to start doing segmentation of learning, sort of cohort analysis, that sort of thing, I think that's one of the research programs that we want to be engaged in over the next little while. Ultimately, there's adaptivity within the questions can mean multiple things. So at a basic level, simply having more instructor-guided adaptivity where it's if student enters this sort of response, send them this way, this sort of response, send them this way, give them this feedback, is sort of, for the early 2019 timeframe, a lot of what will get done will likely be limited to that area versus the more machine learning side of things and automated adaptivity. But ultimately, the same tool set needs to work in that direction as well.
So something you mentioned was that your new system was set up to also gain acceptance from the students, with storing all this data. How will you handle if a student wants to opt out of this? Will they just not be able to follow the course using this, or will you not collect their data then, or?
That's a good question. So if a student opts out from a GDPR perspective, what can they still do? And I'd be curious to know what your opinions are on this. This is a question that we've sort of wrestled with. If a student opts out, we can no longer have really any personal information about them. So as it stands, they'll no longer have access to the system. But I'm certainly interested to know what other people's opinions are, interpretations are of the law.